So welcome everyone to the JB Media Digital Drop-In. I'm so glad to see everyone today. If you're just joining us, just a quick reminder on some housekeeping things. One, we have the Q&A feature, so you can drop questions in there. We'll definitely be tracking that throughout the webinar. You can also, if you don't see the Q&A feature, drop questions in the chat, and I'll be paying attention to that today as well. Also, we record all of these webinars and we provide a slide deck as well as the recording on the Friday after. So you should get an email on Friday with this information. You can download it, save it, share it with whoever you'd like. So I always encourage you, if you know somebody that could use the information, to please feel free to send it out to folks that you know. The other thing I want to share with everyone is if you just went to Google and you typed in JB Media Institute Vimeo, you would get our entire channel. So I've been emailing with some folks and just reminding them that our Vimeo channel has every free webinar that we have done since 2015 loaded up to it. And so you can go and look at any variety of topics that you want to. If you have attended them in the past and you've lost your link or something of that nature, we've databased everything up on the Vimeo channel. And the fastest way there typically is just to use Google, JB Media Institute Vimeo, and it'll pull us up right at the top or one of our more recent videos. So just encourage everyone to use this as a resource. And I am going to introduce our guest today, but I want to start really quick by diving into the slide deck and just sharing a couple things before I introduce you to somebody that I have been loving having these conversations between myself and Jay about customer reviews and customer relationships and how to really utilize this approach for growing your business. And I think especially in the small business world and even in the nonprofit world, there's this huge opportunity that we don't really think about enough. And I wanted to start first with just three basic principles, right? One is marketing just means relationships. That's what it is. Many of you know when I hear people say they hate marketing, I get really sad on the inside because I feel like what you're saying is you hate your relationships with your existing and potential customers. And I'm like, we don't want to hate those people. They're giving us money and they're part of our community. We want to love those people and build a relationship with them. If we can't love them, we at least want to like them and figure out how to work together, right? So marketing is just relationships. And I think this is where the core of this conversation comes from. The second point I want to make is that marketing is customer service. So I really think we should never separate these two things again. I think they are unified, they are one. The messaging that we put out into the world doesn't just go to people who haven't heard about us before. It actually largely goes to the people who already support and believe in us. And so I think really in the digital age, marketing and customer service are the same thing. And anybody who's having a bad time can go out into the world and talk about it when it comes to your products and services. So a negative customer service experience is directly impacting your marketing every single time. And I just think we have to, kind of in the old days, we thought of these things as different departments or jobs. And I feel like if you're in marketing, customer service is part of your job. And then I just wanted to say as a third point that marketing is connection. So in the spirit of relationships, relationships begin with a point of connection between your brand and a person, between you and a person, between a staff member and a person. So I think it's just important sometimes when we talk about marketing strategy that we sort of get rid of the word marketing because I think it's really general and really broad. And I think it doesn't really serve us sometimes to get into this marketing mindset. I think we really want to get into the mindset first of connection, relationship, and customer service. And when we come at it from that perspective, we end up being able to do some amazing and different things. So again, I want to give my special and esteemed guest, Jay Silver, a chance just to really quickly for a minute or so introduce himself. And then we're going to go into some stats and then we'll launch into a Q&A today about this particular topic. But Jay, could you just take a couple minutes to share with everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everybody. My name's Jay. I started a locksmith company in 2008 in the teeth of the recession. I actually had absolutely no intention of starting anything. I was in school prior to 2008, going into my junior year of college. when I had the rug pulled out from under me quite abruptly. The recession hit pretty hard, and many people that I knew, including family members. So yeah, I pretty much lost everything. I had to drop out of school. I lost my apartment, moved back in with my mom. All the income streams I had to keep myself through school just dried up almost instantaneously. So I was pretty much at a loss of what to do. And I had some friends encourage me to just offer some of the services that I knew from locksmithing. It's a job that I learned from my father growing up. He actually had a locksmith shop in the Yorkville area of Manhattan, and he was a shopkeeper for about 4 decades. But that was never a business I ever wanted to be in, and I was actively trying to get away from it. So 2008 rolls around and hit me pretty hard, and I had to just do something for income, just for the sake of independence and to, not live off my mother, when I'm getting close to 30. So that said, I started off with a Craigslist ad, and that was gaining some traction. And the same friends that helped me encouraged me to get on Yelp, including some clients that I had met through Craigslist. And that's pretty much what changed everything. I had a very, very basic, cheap site, and I just put a few services, and they were the only services I was able to offer because I didn't have enough money to even buy material to offer other services. So I just picked the 3 main ones. I was very transparent about the price. Literally, I put the prices of all 3 services up front, and I started to get traction almost immediately from Yelp just by being transparent. And, in my industry, if anyone has had to call a locksmith, they probably don't have a lot of good things to say about it. In New York, that industry was really synonymous with just, the devil incarnate. Like, no one wants to call a locksmith. Everyone has an awful story about it. So I knew the discontents in the industry, and with those few services, I knew that's where people were primarily getting ripped off. So the fact that I was transparent about it, and I got some calls based on that, and I maintained consistency with my price that was available online with the service that I provided, and that led to people being vocal online. And the first, I would say, 10 to 30 reviews really came from like, wow, that was unexpected and very different from the prior experience I had. Yeah, this is interesting. This is the real deal. Definitely call this guy. So it was all people speaking to a prior experience and how much better, it was with me. And I was just so shocked that people were calling and that people were even being vocal about that. It was mostly because I just thought, okay, this is the right thing to do. This is how, all the immigrant shop owners in the area I grew up in took care of their clients. You saw the same faces every day. If you were, it just wasn't in your best interest to be a bad guy in a neighborhood. So coming from that old school neighborhood mentality, that's how I wanted to treat everyone that sort of quote unquote came through my door, but who found me on Yelp. So it was kind of second nature for me to treat people like that. I just didn't realize that now they have a platform to be vocal about that experience. So I have told Sarah in our private conversations that positive reviews completely changed the course of my life, because I initially just started this business to go back to school. I had no clue that it would be a success. Within 6 months, I was actually the top rated locksmith on Yelp. And I went from being dead broke and unemployed to actually needing to hire people.
No, I think that's amazing, because that's really about the relationship, right? Like, people had bad relationships before, so the relationship they were able to build with you right away was so differentiating that it made a big difference. That's why I think your story is so powerful.
Yeah, that was to your point of marketing equals connection. So in my job, it was pretty unique that I got to connect with everyone that called, from the beginning, whether they sent me a text message, an email, or called on the phone. And then it was primarily calling on the phone. This was definitely right at the cusp of pre-smartphone. I mean, I couldn't afford one anyway. I was actually using a Go phone from Kmart, for my first jobs. Yeah, I mean, I was really, really bootstrapping it. Yeah. And in fact, I didn't even know how many positive reviews I got, because I would typically go online in the public library. I would use my school library. Yeah. So it was pretty amazing to get feedback right away. And, in the beginning, I was met with like a lot of skepticism. People thought I was going to bait and switch them, and they were very guarded. And just the communication there was the key in the beginning. just trying to establish some trust and, just let them know that I'm the person that's there to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where in the slide deck today, I want to share just some basic stats that sort of really back up the story that Jay is telling. We're not going to dig into these too much, but I wanted you to have them to refer to later on in the slide deck. But Bright Local, which is one of my favorite organizations that focuses on local SEO. And as many of you have known, if you've taken my local SEO classes, that local SEO highly involves itself in the review world because we really feel that from a usability perspective, a user experience perspective, reviews are a huge part of how a brand can represent itself. And so Bright Local did a great survey recently. Also at the end of the slide deck, I've included a bunch of other surveys from the last few years, but I just wanted to sort of show you that really at this point, our entire country is looking at reviews. And especially when it comes to local businesses, especially when it comes to brick and mortar businesses or certain types of industries, it's really become a powerful way to connect with people more personally, but in a way where you don't necessarily have to meet with every person, right? It's like you can go online, respond to people and engage with them. And I think it's just a really valuable thing to keep in mind that every year as things develop, behaviors are shifting and changing. And so there's a lot of comparisons here between, the last year or two or the last 5 years. And what we see is everything is kind of increasing when it comes to this conversation, right? And not only are people reading the reviews, they're actually writing the reviews as well. And a lot of times we see that this is happening for people once a week or more. So once a week, multiple times a week, or every single day, people are literally engaging. The people who do it less than once a month or only once a month or not at all is actually a much smaller percentage than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. So people are really seeing that the online review world is a way for them to connect in more quickly with the experiences of others. And one of the other things I've noticed over the last 20 years is it used to be there were some industries where reviewing was really, really strong, typical, and a big part of the process. Other industries, not so much. I'm really starting to see that reviewing is becoming really ubiquitous across all the industries. So again, it's a way that you can go find out what kinds of experiences other people had. And this graph in particular, I really appreciated because people really consider reviews just as important on a lot of levels as they do personal recommendations. Not exactly the same, but we really see that if somebody's writing reviews that are detailed and give you good information about how to make a decision about whether or not that product or service is right for you, that you actually really value that feedback. And I was telling Jay, I use Google quite a bit, and I in my personal life, do a lot of traveling and going different places. And I'm now what they call a local guide on Google because of the amount of reviews I've written. But not only the amount of reviews I've written, how many people have read them and marked them as useful to them, right? So even though I don't know these people, there is this connection that we're actually making. I also love some of the studies, information that Bright Local brought to the table around why people are writing, right? Because people went above and beyond, right? I think, Jay, you touched on something really important. Their last experience was bad. This experience was good. And that's a real motivator for people. When their story says, I can't trust these type of people or this type of person, and then they're proven wrong, it is actually almost like exciting for them to go tell everybody that they were proven wrong, that, these types of people are better than they thought. We also see there's a lot of different platforms that are kind of ebbing and flowing on a regular basis. So there's some great information in here about what is the most popular. Google, of course, sits at the top along with Yelp and Facebook and TripAdvisor. I love that the Better Business Bureau is still in there, y'all. It didn't just disappear. And so you can go get Better Business Bureau information online. But I think it's interesting as we look at data over the years, how these things are ebbing and flowing. And Jay and I have talked about how in different regions, and when you're looking at urban areas versus rural areas, some platforms have more strength than others. So it is important to pay attention to your community and really understand what your community is engaging in. And then by industry, there's also things that are really strong. So Yelp, you can see, does really strong in that restaurant kind of world. They've always had that as kind of a strength. TripAdvisor, though, does really well when it comes to lodging and accommodations. So some of the more niche kind of websites have different power depending on what type of business that you have. The other thing that I think is interesting is that things like Google sit at the top of trustworthiness in a lot of ways. And also, people have a very strong opinion about what fake reviews are and how they look. And I thought it was really interesting that, when somebody just puts a star rating but doesn't write anything, people question the validity of that star rating. So it doesn't help you if you have 20 people go give you a 5-star review without saying anything about their experience. People will question the legitimacy of that. And if something is too good to be true, you actually might set the wrong tone. And I've been studying this for a lot of years. So some of you who've been in my local SEO classes know we've talked about this. It is okay not to have perfection in this world. And the same thing with over-the-top negativity. So if someone is just ranting and they're not making any sense, don't worry about those people. The rest of the people reading are actually smart enough to know this is not a legitimate complaint. This isn't somebody being productive, asking for help, or asking for a problem to be solved. They're just over the top being negative. They're in a bad mood. Maybe they had a bad day, and they will write that kind of stuff off. So some of the basic human behavior stuff that we understand about each other, we can trust that that's happening in this world. Most of you know one of my soapboxes, respond to everything. I have such a soapbox about this. And I think, this is something to really think about when you're not responding to your positive reviews. What does that mean? Because a lot of people judge you on this. They judge you based on the conversation and the back and forth and the time that you're putting into things. I also thought it was interesting that when it comes to requesting reviews, receipts and invoices, in-person or on-site requests, and email are at the top drivers of why people would write a review for you. So I've often advocated that in any way that you are interacting with people and then have the ability to email them, that you should request pretty quickly that you get feedback from them so they can give you that feedback in the moment when they've had the experience, whether it is good or bad, right? I also loved this sort of study showing basically that, again, we don't have to be perfect. People like 3s and 4s. They do. They consider it more helpful, right? Because they might learn something about your products and services and whether or not it's right for them or not right for them. If everything in your reviews is utter perfection, it makes it harder for the person to feel like those reviews are actually helping them make a choice that's based on their needs and information that they can gain. So I like to just remind people, don't be afraid. If you get a bad review, or even if you get 5, it's not the end of the world, right? It's about the interaction that you have, the way that people are talking about it. So again, we're going to jump into the Q&A, but I see there's a question in here already from Tanya, so I want to bring that to the table. Tanya says, I have so many customers say that they're going to write a review and they never do it. I give them a link and I talk them through the process and I can't seem to get them to complete it. And I think this is something a lot of people go through. So let's just start with that. Jay, do you have any thoughts about what to do when you have a process for requesting the reviews, but they're not happening? I know for you, you didn't have to have that in the beginning because they sort of organically happened on their own. But have you talked to anybody about that or have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, so generally I've never sent, I didn't have like a scripted or somewhat scripted email to ask a review or sort of like a follow-up plan. Generally it was asking for feedback after the job was done, and I instructed, the people working with me to do the same, or, just have an organic conversation about, hey, where did you find me? Oh, interesting. You found me through that site. Well, we'd really appreciate your feedback, or thank you so much for, finding us through that site. Our best customers come through that site, and we'd really appreciate your feedback, or if you can add to the chorus. My suggestion is just look at your approach and see that maybe you can personalize something within that email. If it's generally like an email request, make it as personal as possible. I think just, lead with your strengths of how, like, thank you for being the best part of the company, really appreciate your support, or in the event that where that person, came from, leaving a link and saying like, please add to the chorus of our great reviews. That's just how great people like you find us, So it's really stressing how important they are to your business, like that your feedback is the integral part to our business, and it's actually what grows our business. So to get away, and I'm not assuming that you're doing this. I like something that speaks more to like, oh, gratitude to the client versus like hey, you'd be doing us the biggest favor if, you know what I mean? It's more like, oh, we would, we value you so much and we value your opinion, just as much as your patronage. That's what yeah. So it's that's like not asking them to do really extra. That's sort of going into a little bit of like reciprocity. It's like, I want to know how special you are, and your opinion that you can share with everyone else is just as special. So, it's sort of leading.
Yeah, I'll just echo that, because I think it's really important when you're talking to customers and you want to motivate them to take action, that you really shine the spotlight on them instead of yourself. I also think, Tanya, you can look at your sales process and figure out, is there more than one place? And you might, again, be already doing this, but is there more than one place where you can make the ask? I tend to feel like people tend to want to ask once, and they kind of do it at the end of a process, which means there was no conversation at the beginning of the process about doing it. And so, of course, there's different ways. If you're more personalized in your sales, then you've got more of a script you can run. If you have a more automated, like your e-commerce, you have a more automated system, you can actually still work the ask into different parts of that process. And so I think it's, that combination of those things is super helpful, right? And feel free to add to that question, Tanya, if you want. And I see we've got another question in the chat. So let's take a look at that. Claudia, thanks so much. If you request a review via email and you shipped the product, when is the best time frame to send it? So again, I think I just answered that actually, which I don't think there is one time to send it. I think that you should include, so like if I'm on an e-commerce store, I actually have automated emails built in quite a bit, right? And so I often look at how can we take that snippet that basically says, write us a review, and gives them the links that, they can choose from. A lot of times I want to have one or two links at least personally, just because people have different places that they like to write the reviews. But I'll incorporate that into like looking at the whole entire process, right? So if they order, they're going to get probably maybe 3 emails in that process. When the order is complete, when the order is shipped, when they know the order has been received. And so I'm actually going to have more personal written up information going out to folks. And then obviously, unless you're doing some real strong customization and segmentation of your marketing, it's not necessarily like you're writing a personal email to the person, but I think what Jay is touching on is the language of these things being more personal. So I cannot count the amount of times I've worked with an e-commerce business where they are scanning the content like right out of the store. Like they never edited any of the store like emails. They just left it like this very generic conversation. And so to me, I'm going to skip over that when I'm receiving that, even if I bought a product, because it's not making me feel like we're having a conversation. So I feel like thinking about, not just the end of the order process, but maybe when the order is completed, ask them to review something. When they've received the order, ask them to review something. And like Jay said, shine the spotlight on them and make them feel like you're asking for something about them because you care about them, you care about their opinions, and things like that. And you'll never get everybody to do it. There's a certain type of person that I think will do it for different reasons. There's different motivators. But I think if you can think about that whole process and work it in, it makes more sense. So again, feel free to add any other questions that you want in there, but I want to go on to our next one for Jay, which is, you shared a lot with me about the aspects of online reviews that have really excited you over the years, and that most of it is around those relationships, the connections that you made with people. One of the things that I love that you have shared with me before is this idea of the law of reciprocity, and how that relates to kind of building powerful online reviews that really grow a business. So could you just take a couple minutes and talk a little bit about the law of reciprocity and how you see that playing into this?
Sure. I mean, this was like kind of like a law that I stumbled upon because I'm really the definition of an accidental entrepreneur. This wasn't a business I wanted to get into, and I was sort of thrust into the review world without really knowing much about it. The whole goal was to just have another platform other than Craigslist that might draw people in. And little did I know it was a platform where I could compete against much bigger players and brick and mortar, businesses that have been around for, like generational businesses. And here I'm like a small fish in a very big ocean, but I could have an online presence. So like what generated people talking, and, how did I win this game that I never wanted to play? And the answer to that is reciprocity. And the way I understand it is that if someone does something nice for you, you kind of feel obligated to do something nice back. That's the most rudimentary definition as far as I understood it. And the reciprocity came in a couple different forms. I would say that one was in the beginning, I just completely upended an expectation. There was definitely a prejudgment of what was going to happen based on prior experiences. So I kind of upended that. So people, I feel like they felt this obligation to tell other people, here's how you don't get ripped off, especially with the reputation that was already in place in the industry. And it's like, hey, we found a good guy. Let's help this guy out because he helped us, kind of thing. And then there was that the first part, which was you did something nice and they want to do something nice in return. So I often found many opportunities to do something extra for people. Like New York is a very, very poorly managed old city that's crumbling, So when somebody would hire me to do a lock, there was always 10 other things that you could help them with. So, I often met people that were just moving in. So, they're fumbling with blinds or, trying to get an air condition not to fall out of a fourth story of a building, So like I just help them there. I have a drill. Let me put a couple of screws in, help with the blinds. My favorite one, and this is one that actually contributed to dozens of reviews, is that the hinges are so old in these old, particularly pre-war buildings, that it sounds like a haunted house every time you open the door. So I would, as soon as I opened the door, I would notice that. And sometimes it would be the first thing or the last thing I would do in front of the client is literally just oil the hinges. And then this screeching door that would wake up their 3 roommates that they're living with, coming in at all hours, that was like a big deal for them. It's like, oh my God, I cannot believe you fixed that, and it's something as simple as an oil can, really contributed to reviews. And that speaks to the extra and somebody feeling almost like, oh, obligated to, to doing something in return, and those are like the different forms of reciprocity that I've experienced. Generally it was that, oh, okay, wow, this is a surprise. There's a service person here that we generally associate with a ripoff artist who's actually being kind, and being transparent about the price and doing extra. So I that was a good thing I had going that contributed to people being very vocal about it.
I'll just throw out that Tanya just added in an additional part to her question. And I feel like you're touching on something that's super helpful for what she's saying, because she was basically clarifying that they have personal conversations with people at the end of the job, and then they follow up with an email link. And then a lot of the buyers in person during the pickup, they're like, yes, we're going to do it when we get home. And then they don't do it. So I just want to say, Tanya, you're not the only one with that struggle. There's lots of times where customers say they're doing something later and this is never going to happen. But I love what Jay is sharing, because I think this is where him and I have been talking about, like, online reviews are the end of a sales process. So what can you do when you have them in person to make them feel so excited about what happened that they want to talk about it? And, that's like looking at it more holistically instead of just looking at the end and making a request. But like, how do they feel like they want to reciprocate the energy? I think there's a lot of things we can do in our sales process to think about that. I've also been reading a lot of studies about people who are making signage, but also in the end of their sales conversation on site, talking about having the person do it right there. Right. And they might say no to doing it right there. Maybe they're busy or whatever it is. But it's okay to get a no in that respect. Right. Now, if you've said, hey, could you guys mind writing us a review? I've even read about companies that now have like an iPad at their, place, and you could just write the reviews on different things. Depending on, obviously Google, you want them in their own Google account or Facebook or something like that. But if you're getting them for your website or something of that nature, you can even collect them in different ways. So I think it's about maybe holistically thinking about that opportunity you have in person, because I think that in-person opportunity is really great. I also think, like I said, signage has become a bigger thing for people who are in person with folks in a brick and mortar, right? Is that they have signage that literally says, here's the QR code, go review us right now. Or something that allows them to immediately get to that link and take care of that, which I think is strong. So the other question that I wanted to talk about is, some of the key, we've talked about how, organically in your industry, you were able to generate a lot of reviews just by sort of differentiating yourself out of the gate from a customer service perspective. But are there any other things that you were doing that helped you increase the number of positive reviews once that snowball was rolling? Were there specific strategies that you felt like made the biggest difference?
Sure. I mean, based on all the feedback that I received and, some of the arbitrary things that I knew just from growing up in a local shop, and a small tight knit community, just how to basically be nice to your neighbors, I pretty much took that and turned it into a business model. So, the foundation was all of my primary differentiating factors, and the business strategy just came from what people were very vocal about. So, I have experience in 2 different markets at this point, about 2 years in Austin and 11 years in New York. And, now I'm in a Florida market, and it's going to be kind of interesting. Going to do things a little bit differently here, but I realized that, what New Yorkers came to appreciate, believe it or not, what's very consistent there is kindness. It was communication. Particularly when I was running late. I mean, it's impossible to get anywhere in New York. Everything's running late, so it's very obvious. However, if I didn't call you to tell you I was running late, that would be a major strike against me. If I did call to say I was running late, I mean, people treated me like I was the second coming. They're like, you don't know how many people that have given us this ridiculous window and they've come hours late and I never received a call, And that's just not in New York City. That's pretty standard amongst, so especially if you're waiting for cable or things like that. It's like a 4-hour or waiting for a furniture delivery, God forbid. It's one of those things. But I would call, and I even set some protocol in place that if we're talking about inordinately late. So, this isn't 15 minutes or 30 minutes. It's like I'm going to be 2 hours late. So something just went to complete hell, and now I'm coming to you extremely late. I would give them a substantial discount for their time. So it was just always that your time is valuable to me, and I'm owning up to my mistake, kind of thing. So I noticed that was valued in New York, was that type of communication. And another thing that was valued, believe it or not, was cleanliness. So they loved when I cleaned up after myself, because that was another thing. People are installing cable, they're leaving clippings of wires everywhere, and it just drives people nuts. And it's funny because New York is a horrifically dirty city, but it's like, this is in my home, it's my mess, I don't want you bringing your mess, So the fact that I cleaned it up now, this was a real game changer, because now when people I had working with me, the first thing I would give them literally was a broom and dustpan, just a small little hand, dustpan, and make it very obvious that you're cleaning up after yourself, and even ask the client for a vacuum, because we just couldn't carry that much stuff on us. Some of my guys were taking the train everywhere, but it was just what was valued. And so in many of my reviews, and he cleaned up after himself, shocking, So it was just one of those things. Whereas in Texas, it was actually it was a promptness. People were not used to being helped the same day or even the next day. They were used to waiting a week. So the fact that I brought a little bit of New York hustle to that market, it was like, what? He came the same day. And so a couple of reviews are like, he came within 2 hours of my call. And I'm like, oh my God, if I did that in New York, they'd crucify me if they had to wait 2 hours, So it was kind of interesting, the things that were valued. So, and also as the market started to change, and the prior reputation really set the bar low enough for me that, people would demand cash. The smartphone basically could turn into a POS system. I started taking credit cards. People love that. And the business model, I'm kind of going all over the place, so bring me back to the question, but it was all centered around what people just loved, whether they were vocal about it online or in person. So they loved not having to pay cash. That was a big thing. So in many of my earlier reviews with the inception of things like Square, they loved using Square. And then as Venmo gained in popularity, it was like, and he takes Venmo. So it was just meeting the clients in the most convenient way possible, for them. So, showed up on time, compensated if I was running late, pay me however the hell you want to pay me, you know? I'm not going to say no to any form. In fact, they motivated me to get on other things. You know, like I never really cared for Zelle, but some of my older clients use Zelle.
Yeah.
That's you know, definitely what they want. So if I didn't, then what I would do was say like, okay, if that's your preferred method of payment, hang tight. Let me start a Zelle account and I'll send you the invoice and just pay through Zelle.
Yeah.
So, you know, so it would just be meeting them where they're at and on every level. But it was, I structured everything to be like, okay, transparency was a big thing. Great. We're transparent. So my 3 qualities were, it was trustworthiness. So I background checked my guys. We're background checked. We take all forms of payment. We're transparent and cheaper. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's meeting everything that was the qualities that I, you know, that they were vocal about, that
Yeah.
and the online reviews that I received in New York, that's what was front and center.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because one of the things that I've taught in a lot of my classes, that I love to do with people, that is an exercise I've shared with you before, is I love to help people go look at all their reviews, copy and paste everything into a document, and then remove everything except for the like descriptive language. So the adjectives that people are using about your brand and like the phrases they're using to describe their experience. And when we do that, we actually get a vision of both the good and the bad. Typically, hopefully the good is much larger pile than the bad, but we really start to see the perception of the customer. Like we start standing in their shoes, right? Which I think is so, so important, because the strategies you want to use to incentivize people to write reviews, to actually provide better customer service as your company is moving forward, I think it has a lot to do with listening. And that's what you're talking about. It's listening to the customers and figuring out ways that you can show up for them so that they are so excited that they got the level of service that they got, or they love the product so much. And so I think a lot of people, we don't take that little bit of time. And in the world of online reviews, that's really not that hard. You could take like an hour of your life and you could learn a lot about what people say about you, what they want from you, what they don't want from you. I think it can even make you better at talking about the things that aren't working, right? Like if you can really understand from the customer's perspective what hasn't worked for people, you're going to get better at sales, because you're going to be able to explain those limitations up front, or you're going to be able to mitigate them, or maybe you're going to be able to create a different process that removes some of those obstacles, right? But I think sometimes we get into our own heads. We're not listening to the actual customers to understand where we need to put our energy, but they're literally telling us a good chunk of the time. So I know we're coming up right to the last 10 minutes. I want to invite everybody again, if you've got specific questions today, to feel free to pop them in the chat and Q&A. But there's 2 more things I wanted Jay to provide some feedback on. And this sort of was a good segue into from what I just said into this next question, which is, so did you ever get bad reviews? And if so, like, how did that make you feel? How did you manage that? Because I think small business owners especially, but especially those of us who are entrepreneurs in any way, you know, we're really knit into our companies. So when we take criticism, it sometimes feels real personal. So I'm just curious, like, how have you advised people about how to handle the things that don't work out?
Yeah. So my first bad review, I think I cried. Okay. So, I mean, yeah, I just literally was in tears. I couldn't believe it. And I didn't even realize what mistake I made. And it became very obvious what mistake I made. I did call the client. I reconciled it. I asked him if he would consider, you know, amending the review if I can reconcile, you know, some of the things that I messed up on, and he said that he would consider it. I didn't use any strong language or try to bargain with him, like, hey, if this then that. I was like, would you consider? Let me first correct my mistake, and I'm sorry. This must have seemed awful for you, and this is not consistent with my business practice. So let's make this right. And if I make it right, if you can consider doing that. And he ended up actually being a very, very nice person, you know, and incidentally a repeat client. Which was wonderful. But that said, I can contribute about 100 positive reviews based on that negative review experience of how I kind of pivoted my business from that. So what I didn't realize that he made, you know, very clear to me was that there was a particular service that I had that he didn't seem. It didn't seem fit to warrant an expense. You know, it was kind of like, oh, this is like a nothing that, you know, something that you should throw in or should be done at like a deep discount. And that changed a lot of things, because from a mechanic's perspective, it was like, wait, no, that actually is a lot more complicated than what you originally hired me for. But they're not a mechanic. And if they were, they wouldn't have hired me in the first place. So I needed to meet the customers where they were at. So I noticed that simple service that didn't seem that would warrant a charge. So I started keeping a lot of old parts and refurbished parts, particularly for that. And what I had done was when I saw that particular item be faulty, which was a lot, it was basically like doorknobs, in locks that are unique to New York City and parts of Chicago. City locks are different than suburban locks. So those things would kind of conk out, and I would keep parts ready and I would actually say, hey, listen, you hired me for this, but this part is conked out. This has to go. Hang tight. I may have one in the car for you. And let me just throw that in. And that little extra, that is what inspired the reciprocity. So this bad review, actually pivoted my business into, okay, now let's see what clients value, what services they value, what they don't value, what would look good for me if I actually threw it in, so that's one thing. And so I limited a lot of bad reviews because from there, I developed a bit of a damage control protocol. It's not hard to imagine how many things can go wrong in New York, in such a chaotic city. So I just applied Murphy's Law and just literally, especially when I had staff, it was just regimented. If this, then that, if this, then that. Let's go down the list, Part of the game changers were just, if you want to exceed expectations, and if you're not meeting them, for me, the ultimate pacifier was like, okay, just here's a bit of a refund, like this is not what you hired us for. And that generally cooled a lot of the flames. But was the biggest game changer, I'll be honest with you, to both receiving positive reviews and minimizing negative reviews, is when I paired with a charity. So, you saw my rescue cat, come in. I had a rescue dog for many years. And, he inspired me to volunteer for shelters, and I rescued him from a no-kill shelter. So developed some relationships with one no-kill shelter in Brooklyn. It's called Sugar Mutts Rescue. And I began to, when I could afford to donate more and more to them, I did, and then made them a part of my business practice. If things started to go south, or something that looked pretty bad for a mechanic, like, oh God, I came here to fix one thing, but this other thing is broken that they didn't know, that looks terrible for me. It'll be like, hey, there's another problem with your car. You know what I mean? It just looks shady. So because I had the charity, I would say, look, this thing is a problem. I know you didn't hire me for this, but it's going to look, and I'm just transparent. It's going to look terrible if I charge you for this, but I work with a charity. If you want to throw them a couple bucks, that'd be amazing, or we'd set an amount. Or if a job went south, I would say, and like jobs have gone really south, and the clients have been fuming. And I'd said, look, okay, listen, the whole job is going to charity now. Let's make this right. And I turned an enemy into a friend very, very quickly, And so that was, and I obviously, I contributed to the charities with a lot of sincerity, but wow, was that ever a safety net to fall into, many times. So yeah, it just brought trust back.
Yeah, well, and I think too, one of the things, again, that we talk about in the classes a lot that I teach is about, again, marketing is relationships, it's connection, it's customer service. And at the core of all those things are people's feelings. And even when we're just talking about building a business in general, the truth is we need people to feel an emotional connection to what we're doing. And so I feel like, there's a lot of talk in the world about incentivizing reviews. And you and I have talked about buying reviews. If you took nothing away from this conversation between Jay and I think it would be like, never buy reviews. We both agree it is the worst. And if you get caught, you get into a lot of trouble. And when I say buy reviews, I don't just mean like you paid somebody money. I mean like Google is a very harsh taskmaster that you should not be giving away free stuff. You should not be paying people off to get the good reviews. And if they get too many of them all at once, they will actually flag your account. Great to see you, Dave. Thanks for being here. So it's, to me, we don't want to go that direction with it. We want to have authentic connections, and we want people to feel bonded to us for a number of different reasons. But I think one of the first ins is always, what do you really care about? What matters most to you as a person? And when you can share that with your potential and existing customers, it just builds a different kind of conversation. This is where I often get on another soapbox where I'm like, why do we always separate business and pleasure? why are we so stuck on like work is not the same as our personal lives? I'm like, that's not true for a lot of us, you know? I feel like it's really important that, we make those connections with folks. So I know we've got a couple more questions I want to talk about before we wrap up today. So thanks so much. Visit Lebanon Valley's dropped in here. They were curious to know what best practices are for dealing with reviews that are negative, but are also several years old. So like it's sat out there for a while. Now you're contemplating. I know I have an answer for this, but I'm curious, Jay, for you, if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on how to deal with bad reviews. If they
Well, and yeah, I wanted to say too, just because we have a short amount of time, really looking at those old ones too. Like I think because a lot of people avoid them.
Oh
I
yeah,
guess
well,
I was guilty of this as
no, me
well. So I just
included.
wanted to throw that out.
Me included. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would just trust the innate intelligence of the reader. You're writing to the reader at this point. You're reconciling. Doing your best to reconcile with the client, but you're really writing to the reader. So keep the reader in mind, and keep in mind that your response is valuable to who's reading it. So don't look like you're having a fight online. That's just stupid. It's counterproductive, and that's a nice way of putting it. If you can own up to anything that you did wrong in that, or where what I like to point out is that like I would love to or I'm going to send you a private message with my contact information. I would love to see where our communication fell apart. I love seeing people sort of reach out like on a personal level with that. It's like, okay, obviously our service didn't meet the expectations that we take pride in. I would, love to reconcile this with you. Here, I'm going to send you a private message, and feel free to call. And we'd love if you give us another opportunity to give it our best shot. So we want to earn your business again, basically. So and
Yeah.
writing to the reader that you're sincere in either reconciliation or like hey, we hope we could do better for you next time.
Yeah, and I do want to say too that I think I've worked with a lot of organizations where, again, whoever was in charge of this before, or maybe there wasn't anybody in charge of responding. So there was things that kind of got just left. It's as if somebody made a complaint that was legitimate, but nobody ever responded. And I just want to say, like, it's never too late. In my opinion, it's never too late to do it. And it's never too late to take ownership, especially for small businesses. Hey, we're sorry we did not have time to handle this 4 years ago. But we are evaluating our customer service stuff. We're making sure that we've talked to everybody. We still want your feedback. Reach out to us. Here's how you can do it. Because I think even years after the fact, coming back in makes a statement to people who are the readers, who maybe are new and exploring your brand. They are getting the idea that, maybe you didn't have perfect customer service before, but you're working on it. You're making better. You're putting the investment into the relationship. And I think that actually leaves a huge impression on people. Even if it seems like it's from a long time ago, I just feel like anytime that we reinvigorate the relationship, it's okay. And the readers, like Jay pointed out, are so important for them to see you kind of making that effort, even if you didn't make it before. And then I just wanted to throw out, Ayanna shared in here, responding to terrible reviews is the worst, but it's a total must. I love when a good, honest response to them prompts the user customer to edit their review to a kinder one and inspires them to hopefully give the biz another shot. And yeah, as we're wrapping up, I really appreciate that feedback, Ayanna, because I wanted to share a story. I'm going to share just an example of a review that was given to me by Jay when we were thinking about this topic today, because I really liked it. And again, it has a lot to do, I think it reflects a lot of the conversation around why your sales process from beginning to end should incorporate reviews. And there should be this whole thing that happens from a customer service perspective. I wanted to share, in addition to this, that one of the things I thought was interesting from a student of mine is they actually had a fail on their e-commerce website. The product didn't go out on time. It didn't get to the person when it needed to. And then when the order finally got there, it was wrong. But the review that this person wrote on their website says, everything about my order was wrong, but the way that they took care of me was amazing. And I'm giving them 5 stars, even though they failed. And I thought that was a huge example recently of why it's so important you know, to have that bigger picture holistically of how you're approaching this topic. Because otherwise, there's no way that somebody who had a bad experience would still say your team was awesome. It's because the customer service response to the mistakes that got made in that order were so strong that it made a lasting impression. So we're going to wrap up because I know everybody's got to get back to work. I did put together some great resources in this slide deck and some inspiration, especially this Tony Robbins word of mouth marketing article that Jay shared with me is a really great one. So dig into some of this information if you want to explore this more. You can also find out more information about JB Media Institute, of course. And then you have my personal contact information always at the end of these webinars. So you can always email me, find me on social media, anything you want to do to connect. And I promise that if you want to hang out with Jay or talk to Jay at all, if you reach out to me, I will gladly share some information so you can contact him. But I just want to say thanks so much, Jay, for being here. It has been really great for us to talk about this topic. And I really hope that this inspires people to have a bigger picture perspective on how all this works.
I know. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, and just seeing all the good comments in here. It was so great to see everybody. Kelly and Tanya, Sarah's and Deb. So glad to have you guys here. And again, for everybody that posted in the Q&A, thanks for the questions. Thanks so much for being here, Claudia. I hope you all will join us in January for the next digital drop-in. We'll actually move it to the second week, which I believe it's January 10th, Wednesday. Since that first week, I know we'll all be coming back for the new year. But I'm excited about our January session. Justin's going to be here and talk about fraud and bot traffic to your website. How do you mitigate some of those experiences if you have kind of a bot attack on your site? How do you make sure that a lot of the things that are attached to your website are legitimate? So it should be a really interesting conversation to start the new year. But thanks again so much, Jay. Great to see you. And like I said, we'll share the recording and the slide deck on Friday. And if we don't see you till the new year, have a great holiday. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.